Right.
If you win every argument in your marriage, congratulations, you're an argument winner, but you have a terrible marriage.
Hello and welcome to the Sittin in a Tree podcast, where we're helping you build a fun and fulfilling marriage, sharing our stories, and giving out advice to move your marriage forward. Now, here's today's show.
Hey everybody, I'm John.
And I'm Shalon.
And this is Sittin in a Tree podcast, the podcast where we try to help you have a fun and fulfilling marriage. This week, we are going to be talking about fighting fair. Is that something that is easy for people to do or hard for people to do?
No, it's not easy. Nobody learns how to fight or how to have a disagreement. We don't usually get those skills unless we are forced to through, anger management or life in general.
Court-ordered, yeah.
Court-ordered.
Yeah.
It's important that we learn to do that in the way we communicate and the way we talk with our spouses about things. Because there are going to be things that come up that we fight about, and there's going to be things that we get mad about. And so you have to learn how to do that in a healthy manner. Fighting fair is important. It just really is. It's a skill that you have to learn, but it's a skill you have to learn with your partner, because how you fight and how you communicate is unique to each relationship and each person. It's a part of the communication that you have to learn and figuring out what the other person needs in that communication during frustration and stress, arguments, fighting, those kind of things.
Before we get much deeper into this, when we're talking about fighting, we mean arguments, disagreements, things of that nature. Definitely not physical fighting. If you're in a situation where there is actual physical fighting taking place, you need to be getting professionals involved. There is no way to fight fair that way.
Right.
We are talking about disagreements that you have in your marriage, those that are common, and then maybe even those that are maybe specific to your particular relationship, you know? And so as we get into it, that's really more where we're headed with this, not so much if it's an actual physical or abusive. That is not fair. There is no place for that in a marriage, and you need to get the help that you need to get out of that type of situation. With that being said, what does it mean to fight fair inside of a marriage? What are ways that we fight fair?
It's about stepping away from the emotions and recognizing what's really going on with me in that moment and why I'm feeling the way I am. Why do I feel like I need to fight with you? What is the trigger? What is the reason that this is so important to me? Why am I feeling so passionate about it that I want to fight about it or argue about it with you? And discuss that with you and find out where you're coming from as well, because maybe it was something I said that triggered the start of it. Maybe it was something you said, but to figure out where it's really going. Where am I really coming from? Is this something personal that you don't know from my past? Is this something, I've just had a really crappy day at work and I thought you looked at me weird, and so now I want to fight with you because you're my safe person? Where am I coming from? So I think it's important you look at that for yourself first and then figure out what your next steps should be.
Many arguments or fights happen when you really could have just kept that internal. You bring up stuff that really has nothing to do with your spouse, isn't in relation to your spouse, but you just need someone to unload on. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, we choose our spouses to do that with, and they get the brunt of all of the bad things that have happened to us that day. And many times we start talking before we ever take a minute to think. The Bible says to be slow to speak and slow to anger. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. If you'll take a minute a lot of times and just decide, is that something that really needs to be said? Or is that something that's just happened in me and I'm looking for a way to vent and get that out? When we do those type of things, we end up putting things on our spouse that they weren't responsible for to begin with.
I think that you make an assumption about the situation and then all of a sudden you've escalated it. And maybe when it's all said and done, you guys sit down and actually really talk about it. And you're like, why were we even fighting? I mean, I don't know. If I look back on us, there were many times that we would be frustrated or arguing about something. And then if we really sat down and thought about it afterwards and you and I were talking, like, I don't even know why we were fighting. Like, what brought this on? What triggered this for us? And maybe sometimes we never figured out why, and other times we did. But I don't necessarily think a lot of the fights that we have as couples for anyone is really worth fighting about. If you take that moment to figure out, okay, why am I fighting? Why do I feel like I need to be fighting? What made me angry or triggered me to begin with? And then say, okay, is this something we need to discuss further? Do I need to go take a minute and process it? What's going on in me? And again, it could be, hey, I just had a really crappy day and you are my safe person. And so, hey, I'm going to take it out on you. Lucky you. That isn't fair for sure. And it's understanding.
But that's something that can be done. We talk a lot about communication. Many fights or arguments would be avoided just with some communication, because
Mhm.
there are times when we do need to vent. And so for you to come in from a hard day at work and say, hey, I just need to vent, and I'm
Mhm.
going to sound angry and I'm going to sound mad, but it's not at you, but
Mhm.
I just need someone to listen to me. I think women are probably much more open to doing that than probably what men are, because we just like to bottle things up inside. And normally it's better to let those things out, because when you do bottle them up inside, that's when you start having silly fights that really don't have anything to do with, hey, there's a dirty plate in the sink, and you blow a gasket over it because you have 15 other things that happened that day that you're mad about. And this is the perfect opportunity to get that all out. And so you take advantage of that, when really, if you could have just said, hey, I had a rough day, here's what happened, and have that discussion beforehand where, hey, if I come home and I tell you I have a bad day and I'm venting, know that whatever my tone of voice is, it's not really directed at you. And that opens up the ability to avoid that fight
Mhm.
altogether. It's important that we also get out there that we would never want you to suppress your feelings in such a way that you keep everything bottled up inside. You do need to get those things out. You need to talk about those things. And there are discussions that need to be had, and there are fights that are worth fighting. But we need to be sure that when we do that, that's because we've basically built points. If you come home and you are, for lack of better words, going crazy every day and flying off the handle and getting mad at everybody and everything and throwing a temper tantrum and doing all of that, you have a tendency to get dismissed. If you are so sporadic that I never know how to take you, or I never know where you're coming from, or I never know when you're going to fly off the handle, I don't know how to respond when you start doing those things. But if we have something set up where you come in and say, I need to vent, then I know this isn't towards me, this is just venting. Or if you come in and say, I need to have a discussion with you, then I know this is towards me, and buckle up, that type
Well,
of
and
thing.
I mean, I think it goes back to communication, like you said, but it's knowing why you're coming to communicate to that person
Mhm.
and what the reason is, and then what's the outcome you're looking for. Are you wanting to fight to fight? Are you wanting to fight to create a change? What are we trying to do with that?
Mhm.
That's about the thought process ahead of time. That's about knowing clearly how you feel. Typically, fighting in the moment while you're angry or while something's happened is never going to work out
Mhm.
well. There are very few people that can take themselves down and be calm and go, okay, well, I was really angry about this. You're still elevated. And so you have to wait and talk about it later, or you need to give the other person at least a second and say, hey, like when you were upset just a minute ago, I felt like you were upset at me. What happened? And you're using that I statement so you know what you're owning, and you're not placing it on the other person and making them defensive. Or, like, hey, I am on my way home from work. I've had a really tough day. I'm really angry. I'm not angry at you. I don't want to be angry at you and fight, just letting you know ahead of time. And so
Right.
that person can have the compassion and understanding. So it is about communicating and letting them know ahead of time, where am I coming from? What's happening? How can we handle that better? And by using the I statements, I feel this way. I'm upset because those kind of things, and not necessarily just assuming that the other person knows where we're coming from or that they're not going to think it's about them. And maybe it isn't about them at all, but it feels that way either from their experience growing up or life. And it's knowing that about each other and each person in that moment.
Right. You said something a while ago. You said fighting to fight.
Hmm.
And a lot of times people do that. They just fight to fight. They're upset. I want to argue with somebody. You're here. Let's go.
Hmm.
And that is a very unhealthy way to live your married life. You are setting a precedent for how you communicate
Hmm.
with each other. And when you do that, it makes it hard for your partner to trust you and trust you with their feelings or with anything, because they never know what's going to be used against them.
Don't keep score in your marriage.
Hmm.
Don't, well, he did this, he messed up there. Although women tend to be more, everything is attached and connected to emotions and events and all those kind of things. You can't then, as a woman, let it all be attached so much so that, well, the last time he came in looking like this, he was mad at me, and make that assumption. You have to step out and say, okay, this is a different situation. Or I don't want to make us fight to fight. And so why am I doing this?
Hmm.
And know that about yourself and what kind of emotional responses and triggers are happening with that. I would love to tell everybody to just come in and say, hey, I was feeling like I was not heard and that made me angry when this happened. Can we talk about it? instead of throwing a dish down in the sink and screaming and going, you're like, why do you hate me? And you're like, what just happened? Now, we are not all at that place and we are not all perfect and we can definitely mess that up. But I think it's important that we try to be at a place that we can come in and say, here's what I know is happening with me. And it isn't about you in a negative way, but I do need to talk to you about this.
When you start keeping score, you run into all sorts of problems because nothing ever gets resolved. So you're constantly stacking up one thing on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. And instead of resolving them as you go, it's just everything gets brought up every time.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to quit keeping score is to resolve those issues when they happen, and then they're resolved.
Mm-hmm.
We can't bring those back up.
Mm-hmm.
We have a tendency to bring up, once we start fighting,
Yeah.
one way that you fight
20 years ago, it was. Yeah.
One way that you fight fair is to stay in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
You can't bring up the fights of the past. You stay in this fight. This
Mm-hmm.
fight is all that's relevant to this fight.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep bringing up those past arguments, those past fights, what you're teaching your partner is, okay, nothing is ever really resolved.
Right.
You're just giving lip service to any kind of forgiveness or resolution that happened. All of that is just lip service. And so it doesn't mean anything. Couples that keep score are headed down a dangerous road.
Absolutely. And so it is about, how do we resolve this? How do we, and what is resolution? Is resolution an apology? Is resolution a, hey, we're both going to check in with each other before? It depends on what the fight is, obviously. But do we need to both apologize? Do we need to find resolution? Do we need to find a compromise or a ground that we can both stand on and feel heard? So we are listening to hear the other person, not defend ourselves, not to jump in and go, well, you were wrong here, which goes back to part of that keeping score and those kind of things, but to really hear what the other person is saying. What is their heart behind the frustration, the hurt, the anger, the fight that you're currently having? Where are they really coming from? And if you take that time to really listen, sometimes if that other person hasn't done a good job of saying, I've had a really bad day at work, and you have been married an amount of time, you may learn that there's a certain way they come in when they've had a bad day at work. And so I'm not going to take anything personally. I'm going to give them some space and go from there. And then maybe later check on them and see what's going on. And giving each other that time is not a bad thing to do. A lot of times there's one person in the couple that wants to either talk about it right now and resolve it. The other person needs time to think about it or whatever. And you have to, again, find compromise with that. If that other person isn't ready to talk about it, you're going to force something that really is probably going to escalate and go badly at some point.
I mean, that's kind of a peek into our marriage there, because I'm not a talk about it right this second person. I've struggled with a temper in the past and I'm pretty good with it now. But if you get me going long enough and things keep stacking up on me, I control it up to a point and then it comes out. Being able to look at you and say, I'm going to need a minute. You know that that's not me dismissing you. You know that that's me taking a breath, taking a moment, calming everything down for a second, and then coming back and having a discussion. There is a guarantee of that discussion. And we set that up where I was able to say, look, I need a minute, but that doesn't mean that I'm dismissing all of this. That means literally give me a minute. I'm going to come back. I'm going to walk out of the room. I'm going to come back in a different person and we're going to have a discussion. And it may still be somewhat heated, but it's not going to be at the level that it was before. And if it starts elevating and getting too heated, then you ring the bell, you take a break in the corner, and you come back out for the next round. Part of fighting fair is not bare knuckles, one round.
It isn't a cage match with the, to the death. Yeah.
There are rounds. There are times to take breaks, catch a breath, to get a drink of water, to calm yourself down, get back into the strategy. And the strategy is not to win. The strategy is to come to a resolution together to build this marriage stronger. Every fight, your goal at the end of that fight should be to have a stronger relationship. And that is what most problems are attributed to in marriages when it comes to fighting or arguing, is that our intention is not to make our marriage stronger. Our intention is to win. And when we're setting out to win, we've got the wrong goal in mind, and no one's ever going to win that. Right. If you win every argument in your marriage, congratulations, you're an argument winner, but you have a terrible marriage.
If you can think about it as not winning the argument, but finding the resolution together, that team idea, again, remembering this is your partner, this is your person, that changes that. And again, that may take you having a few minutes where you take a break. sometimes people need longer than a minute or two, and
Mhm.
that's okay. It's easier to say that sometimes than to allow that to happen. But especially if your partner's consistent about coming back. Hey, I need 30 minutes. I'm going to just veg out. I need to calm down. I want to come back. Give me 30 minutes.
Mhm.
But if you say that, you need to be true to that. So the person who tends to want to go ahead and say, I want the resolution, I want to fix this, I don't want to wait, can really believe that this person can be trusted. They're going to do that. And if it's 30 minutes, you need a little longer, come back and ask for longer, but don't just ignore it and go, oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not going to. No, let that other person know. And then that person that needs that immediate resolution can go, okay, they're still working on it. They haven't forgotten. We can still talk about this. They just need that time.
Well, and you build that up too. When we first started that process in our marriage, I needed longer
Mhm.
than I need now.
Right.
If you'll give me a second just to put my head down and close my eyes and just get out of that moment for a second, I can go right back into a discussion now. But when I was 25, I couldn't do that. My frontal lobe wasn't formed totally
Right.
yet. I didn't have that ability
You
to
were
shut
not
that
fully
off.
growed.
To be able just to close my eyes, take a second, and regroup, we're able to have a discussion instead of an argument.
Right.
And
that's really what we hope in talking about this is instead of fighting fair, it's really having a fair discussion about things that have triggered huge emotions for you. Typically, those are negative, but they can definitely be positive. You want to sit down as a couple and say, let's talk this out. I figured this out about myself.
Right. What we're talking about here is listening to come to a resolution, not listening to defend yourself
Mhm.
or listening to come up with a better point or to argue. And society has taught us when we are having an argument or when
Mhm.
we are fighting, what society and especially social media has taught us is that we read or we listen to formulate an argument,
Mhm.
not to understand where the other person is coming from. We have lost the ability as a society almost to empathize with the other person, to see something from somebody else's point of view.
Mhm.
I don't have to agree with what you're saying to try to come to some understanding of how you got there,
Right.
of why you thought what you thought or why you did what you did. I can see that without having to concede that I agree with it, but I can still see it. And when I'm able to open my eyes and see why you got there or how you got there, 9 times out of 10, what I'm going to see is that you didn't do that with any sort of malice in your heart. You didn't do that with ill intentions. You were just either misinformed or you didn't think about it correctly, or you did think about it correctly and I was wrong. Sometimes I listen to you and I think, I'm the one that's wrong in this situation. And I've got to be willing to say, you know what, you're right. And that's probably one of the things that's missing the most in relationships is being able to say, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. And because that's hard. We're not trained to do that anymore. We're not trained to be wrong. We want to know everything and we want to always be right. And really that connection grows not when you pacify the other person,
Mhm.
but when you really open up your eyes and are able to say, you know what, you're right. It's possible for both of you to be wrong at the same time.
Mhm.
Well, it's possible for both of you to be right at the same time. And it was just a different way to go about it.
Mhm.
To be willing to let your partner be their person and let them go about it a different way. You go about things very differently than I go about things. It makes projects challenging when we're trying to work together on something because we go about those things very differently, many times just from opposite ends of the same problem. But when I got to the point where I could, instead of trying to convince you that my way was the right way, to either go along with you and do it your way, knowing that we'll get there eventually, or let you do your thing and I do my thing and we meet in the middle. When you're able to make those kind of compromises, that deters you from having a lot of those arguments and a lot of those fights that never needed to be had if somebody would have just opened up their ears, opened up their heart, listened to understand instead of listening to win the argument.
And I think it's about also remembering this is the person you love. And
Mhm.
so give them the benefit of the doubt. Where are
Right.
they coming from? What's actually going on? Um, if it's not typical for them to come home, and we've used this analogy, I don't know why this is the one we picked, but come home mad. If that's not typical for them and they don't typically do that and they're mad now because there was a dirty dish in the sink and that's not typical either, then okay, I need to give you the benefit of the doubt. Something is happening here that's not typical for you. And so what is going on? Do we need to have a minute? Do we need to have a do-over? Is it that they just needed to vent and they needed a moment and you were the safe person, which isn't always fair for sure. And you need to go over that. But it's really saying, okay, this person loves me and I love them and they are not out to hurt me purposefully. So what's actually happening? which I think, again, is what you have to do with all of this. Going back to the beginning of having that good communication, knowing where you're coming from with an argument and being clear about what's really happening. What are you owning in this? What do you need from this? And then finding out, how do we come to that compromise? How do we listen to hear and find the apologies that are necessary, the compromises that are needed, the resolution that the partners need, so that you can get to a place where this is a done deal. This argument, this fight, this discussion is done and over, and we can move on. Make up, apologize, feel good about it, and both feel heard, not feel like you're keeping score for later on. Like, I said I'm good, but just wait until he does this again. But really being okay with it and saying, hey, we're stronger for it. I understand this person in a way I didn't understand before, or I can relate and do something different next time this happens because I understand what's going on.
Being able to be sure that you let the other person understand what the argument is about is important. We have a tendency to take off on an argument or something that made us mad and leave the other person in the dust. And
we assume the other person knows, just like we assume because you love me, you're going to know what I need in a positive way. We assume because you love me, you're going to know why I'm mad at you right now. And you may not have a clue.
Yeah.
And even if you guessed, you could be guessing wrong. And then you're trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed. And the next thing you know, you're even more angry and you've escalated the situation because the other person isn't talking about the same thing you're talking about.
Possibly you've been stewing on something for 3 days and I have no idea it's a problem. And then all of a sudden the dam breaks and you start expressing yourself about whatever that situation is. And I'm still trying to figure out what it is that you're upset about.
Yeah, you don't even remember the situation 3 days
This
ago.
is not fighting fair because, this is not a fair fight. You're going to have to give me time or give the other person time to catch up on what it is that you're angry about and why you're angry. And instead of just trying to formulate all of the arguments that you have in your head, because you've had this argument 3 or 4 times in your head and not really with your spouse,
right?
They don't know the answer and they may not answer the way that you thought they were going to answer. You can't just unload on them and expect them to honestly not get mad or not stress out. I mean, there's a fight or flight is going to kick in when someone feels attacked in that way. Letting things build up like that for days and not addressing them
or
early.
Weeks, months, years. I mean, it's important to do that instead of just going, it's fine, I'm not going to worry about that. Oh, it's fine, I'm not going to worry about that. Don't let it build up. Come back and really talk to each other about it in a time where you're not going to be mad and it blowing up. I mean, that would be great. Again, we're not all perfect. We're not going to do it that way. There's still going to be moments that you're going to have heated discussions. But I would love to say, that we have a moment to really think about, okay, this happened. This is how I feel. We need to talk about it in a place where we can calmly say, hey, we need to talk about it. It's important that you try to strive for that. If you know you're more sensitive to things, I think that's kind of where we talk about things to take away and to be thinking about or working on, is to really say, hey, while we're not having an argument, while we're not mad at each other, help me understand. Are you the person that tends to want to talk about it immediately or needs the time? Can we set up a plan where, you get time and, you're going to check back in and those kind of things. And usually people talk about it at the time there's a fight. So it's just more to it. Well, you didn't hear me say it this way, or you weren't listening for resolution. So talk about it when things are good. Talk about what you need. Do you need time and space? Do you want to have a resolution immediately? Do you need me to be very clear from the beginning what's going on, like sending that text message and like, I'm coming for you? I mean, does that stress you? I mean, I don't want to know that. And I know a lot of times you're one of those people, like if I say, hey, sometime this week, can I talk about something with you? I've set that up to be a disaster. So you don't want to do that. So, but figuring those things out, what does that person need? Do we need to sit close to each other and talk? Does that other person need to pace around? Because again, all of that comes from our experiences too. Is that going to trigger something for us? If that other person really does need to be moving quite a bit, if they get loud naturally, is that upsetting to you because you didn't come from a loud family or you did come from a loud family? So talk about those things when times are good and when you're not fighting, and don't pull up an old fight to fight about, but to really start identifying, what do I need? What do I look like when I'm feeling this way, so that the other person knows and you can share that with them and communicate about it. And then they can do the same and you guys can handle those situations in the future differently.
Right. One thing that you can do in that type of discussion is to set up some parameters for where you can ask each other honest questions, or you can remind each other of certain things where you can say whatever it is that
well,
you need to
I was just going to say,
communicate.
I tend to get loud and you're not a fan of that. And so I try not to, or my tone of voice. And you will now say like, hey, I didn't like tone, or I didn't like that tone. It's really more about how loud I am. And a lot of times you'll say to me, "Hey, do you realize you're yelling?" And I'm like, "I have no clue I was yelling. I was just animated and talking." I mean, a lot of times I'm not even mad.
It's not really so much that you are a person who yells a lot. I mean, those people that know you are like, she yells, but it's not that necessarily you yell,
hmm
but as your voice raises, I want to match that. And in the past, I have been one that I just have a very authoritative voice anyway. So it's easy for people to think that I'm mad. And once I start adding volume to that, it gets so much worse. So it's not as much that it bothers me that you are loud. It makes it harder for me to not be that way. And it really bothers you when I'm loud,
hmm
right? When I start even sounding like I may be yelling, then that shuts you down. And I don't want to get to that point. And so I try to be proactive in that so that I don't get there, because we're one, and I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to fight with you. I want to come to a resolution. We are not going to agree on everything. You can have a great marriage and not agree on everything.
Absolutely. And that's not what fighting fair or coming to, I mean, you're not going to have this person be your carbon copy, and you don't want them to be.
Mm-mm.
I mean, yes, we are one, and we want to be able to understand each other, and we want to be able to work with each other so we can bring out the best in the other person. I mean, I love you, but I don't want you to be like me.
Well, we don't grow.
Right.
Neither one of us grow that way. I mean, if we're just exactly like each other, then we're just an echo chamber, and neither one of us push each other to grow. And if you look at your disagreements really as opportunities to grow, I know that sounds pie in the sky right now, but looking back over the years, when we did it right and even when we did it wrong, those were opportunities for us to grow. We did normally go back even when we did it wrong. We got to the point where we would go back and talk about that, and where we would discuss that and how are we going to do this differently next time. We don't want to be that. Neither one of us wanted to have that type of relationship where we were fighting
Right.
all the time. And so we worked really hard to not be that. So we have a lot of discussions that aren't necessarily over topics. They're about how we handle situations when they come up. How do I talk to you about this? How can I say, this?
I think it's important to give yourself that time as a couple to have those discussions. You can do it when you're not mad and fighting. That's even better. So you do know how to manage it when you are. And to really know, hey, this is the person that I love. How do I want to act? How do I want to portray this situation and get where we need to be and then move forward? We forget that so often. I'm defending what I'm saying. I'm listening to defend. I'm talking to you thinking I'm going to have to defend, instead of saying, hey, like, this is my person. They're on my side. They're going to give me the benefit of the doubt, because we've talked about giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And we're going to go ahead and say, okay, where are we really at? How do we find that compromise? How do we get the resolution? There's more to it than that involved in that discussion. And then if there's an apology necessary, how do I make sure I've apologized correctly? But there really is a language of apology that is necessary for each person. And that's going to vary, just like quality time, to one person may be one thing and quality time to somebody else is different. That apology is going to be different for everybody. The way I was raised to apologize sounds like excuses to you for years, and you never felt like I apologized for anything. And then when we were talking about it, I'm like, I apologized. And you're like, oh, well, I didn't realize that's what it was. And the same with me, when you would apologize, you didn't explain anything. You just said you're sorry. And that meant nothing to me because you didn't know what you were sorry for, and so we were not speaking that same language with apology even. And so it was important to have that discussion so you do have that resolution and move forward.
Right. It's coming to an agreement and understanding. I don't have to change my apology to sound like your apology to make you happy.
Right.
But I am willing to tweak it. If that's all that's going to work, then I will figure out a way to make that happen. But I want you to take me at my word. If I tell you I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
And that's understanding and communicating about what you need. Do you need just the I'm sorry from me, or do you need or allow? And I don't mean that as in you have permission, but you understand now where I'm coming from when I say, this is why I got there. This is why, this is why I did what I did, for you to take that sometimes too and be like, hey, like, I totally understand this is how she apologizes. I understand why she needed to say that just as much as sometimes she needs to say, I'm sorry, and vice versa. So that you can then take that and grow, knowing what the other person needs and is coming from, and those kind of things.
We want to be sure that we are understanding why we are fighting, what we're fighting about.
Right.
First thing you need to do is you need to be sure that you both have an understanding of what this discussion is about, what this fight, what we're fighting for,
Right.
you know, and what you are fighting for is resolution, is a better marriage,
Right.
not to be right.
Absolutely.
Not to be right. So that's number one, understanding those things. Number two would be being willing to give time, giving time to the other person, to be able to look at the other person and say, I'm going to need a minute. And then part of fighting fair is giving them a minute because it's going to bring you to a better resolution and not escalate the situation.
And that other person has built that trust up where you can give them that time and you know they're going to come back and not just blow it off and never talk about it again.
When we listen to hear, not listen to argue or listen to defend.
Right.
We're listening to hear the other person, see where they're coming from. We try to empathize with them, try to see how they got to the place that they got to. And the reason that we do that is because we love the other person.
Right.
We're in a marriage. You're not in a debate class. You're not a lawyer. Or if you are a lawyer, you're not a lawyer in this situation.
Right.
You are a husband or wife, and you are not trying to build an argument. You are trying to build a resolution.
And an understanding about that other person.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And then lastly, the apology, being willing to apologize, understanding the apology, knowing that just someone saying I'm sorry is not necessarily just dismissing you, and being able to say, you know what, I was wrong.
It's important to make sure you're taking that time to find out where the person is coming from and really walking away with growth in your relationship instead of walking away feeling like you've won or that you've been heard, but nothing's changed, or you've been heard and we're going to see if this person's going to change. It's really saying I've walked away and this is, we are better because of this discussion.
Right. We're going to fight. We're going to argue. But part of having a fun and fulfilling marriage is to not let that be the majority of the things that we do.
Right.
And so if we keep those where they belong, if we fight fair and we come to resolutions and not just arguments, when we come to resolutions, then we are building a marriage that is going to be fun and fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
He's John.
That's Shalon. And this is Sitting in a Tree podcast. Y'all have a great week. Bye-bye.